Controversy brewing in AEW after a talent was fired from the company for a series of controversial tweets. Who is that talent? What happened? What were the tweets about? All that much more going to be answered in this video. Also going to be talking about an update on a suspended AEW wrestler. So much to talk about. Be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Okay, so first of all, let's get this out of the way. AEW has fired commentator Kevin Kelly from the company. Of course, many of you remember Kevin Kelly from his days in the WWF, then WWE, and then he obviously went over and did great work in a lot of people's eyes in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And it was a bit of a shock when he ended up joining AEW in 2023, but his reviews on Collision as the lead commentator were lackluster, to say the least. And now we're in a situation where he got himself under hot water. So PW Torch, a pretty reputable source here, has said the following of the situation. Quote, Kevin Kelly, who was a part of the AEW Collision commentary team since the launch of the show last summer, has been fired by AEW according to PW Torch sources. Kelly was removed from the roster earlier today. AEW taped Collision tonight. Fightful reported that the announced team for Collision was Shivani and Nigel McGuinness, with Kelly nowhere to be seen during the taping. Now, the report does point to a series of posts online that evidently led to Kevin Kelly's ousting from AEW and ended up leading to him being fired. So here are just two of the tweets, and this has to do with Kevin Kelly calling out a fellow AEW / Ring of Honor announcer in Ian Riccaboni. He says, quote, but the idea of what I bring to the table is lost there because Ian libeled me. So I sit on the bench, valued by my peers, waiting to get my number called. I keep asking why, but get pushed aside. It's okay because there's no one better than me. Ask the ones that know and they'll tell you. And then he went on to say one final thing. Here it is. When you go out of your way to intentionally mischaracterize my raising awareness of the global horrors of child trafficking to a fringe conspiracy theory that everyone knows is bullshit in order to hurt my career and standing in the industry, that at the very least is libelous. Okay, so there's a lot to explain there, obviously. So basically, the story goes, and again, this is just a story, a claim. This is not by any means the truth, but the story goes that because Kevin Kelly on social media was engaging with posts that were seen by many to be, in line with some sort of like QAnon-esque conspiracy theory, the story is that Ian Riccaboni, was talking crap about that. As far as the truth of those, we don't know. But that's the rumor, that's the innuendo there. And because of that, obviously, Kevin Kelly feels like he's been kind of pushed aside. Obviously, he has been kind of in and out of the lineup on Collision before. He has been actually replaced with Ian Riccaboni some weeks, and Ian Riccaboni is someone who many people believe is a great announcer, myself included. I think Ian is one of the best up-and-coming announcers there is. Him on Collision added a very fresh take and a very fresh, enthusiasm that show really needed, that I believe was missing with Kevin Kelly, was missing with Tony Schiavone. I think he himself and Nigel McGuinness really held those shows together when they did those together. But Kevin Kelly obviously believes that he was libeled, that, Ian Riccaboni said that things that were not true, that he believed in this fringe QAnon conspiracy theory, right? And that hurt him in his career, that hurt him in AEW, that hurt the perception of him with fans. And it is nuts to see all of this, happening so publicly, because remember, this is a series of tweets, talent going after talent. like on AEW is like weirdly like no strange thing. This has happened before. And I think, it is like obviously there are times where it's like worked, but like this is obviously not one of those times. I mean, the man got fired. He is gone with the company. He does not look like he's going to be coming back anytime soon. And it's weird because at the same time we're saying this, it's almost like this was kind of destined to happen anyway, because Kevin Kelly on AEW television was just not really the right fit. Like him on Collision, originally it was a great idea in theory, I think, but in practice it just did not work. I think Kevin Kelly is more suited to the wrestling that goes in Ring of Honor, or the wrestling that goes in New Japan Pro Wrestling, excuse me. I think when he was calling New Japan Pro Wrestling, when he was calling those Wrestle Kingdom shows, those G1 climaxes, it was perfect. He was the right guy for that because he knew the history, he knew the wrestling, and I think when you're on more so North American television, AEW does this less so, but you do have to be able to bring that enthusiasm and tell a story. In New Japan, it's like the match itself is kind of the story. It's a competition more so than portrayed on American TV. So you don't really need the extra fluff. Like it relies more on, like you giving facts, you giving, analyzing the moves and things like that. And I'm not saying it's like you don't do that in AEW. You obviously do it more than you do in WWE, but there still is that, storytelling aspect that I think was missing from Kelly's commentary. So Kelly's out. We heard from FightfulSelect.com that Tony Schiavone and Nigel McGuinness were on the call for tomorrow night's AEW Collision show. It was pre-recorded last night, so obviously we know who the commentary teams were. There are pictures floating online about that. But it is interesting. It is an interesting situation. Again, I'm not sure what Kevin Kelly believes or not. He said in those tweets that he obviously believes that QAnon is a weird fringe conspiracy theory that is bullshit. So I'm not going to claim that, he's QAnon or whatever. He's like, some conspiracy nut or anything. But, I think part of it was like the way he handled himself was probably unprofessional. And, if there's one thing that AEW I think has been trying to be more consistent about is to try to be more, about nipping these things in the bud beforehand rather than letting them get out of control. And I think this was a case of that, especially after the whole CM Punk stuff. Like, I think ever since then, that was like a big wake-up call for them. Like, no, we can't allow this. And sometimes you got to just cut the cord and move on. So anyway, Kevin Kelly done with AEW. One person who is not done with AEW, however, is definitely in hot water, is one Sammy Guevara, who was suspended by All Elite Wrestling this week, or reportedly suspended by All Elite Wrestling this week, stemming from an issue that happened in a match that he had with Jeff Hardy that ended up with Jeff Hardy being injured. So we kind of have already known that this had happened, but Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter actually added to this a bit on his show. He stated that Guevara had broken Hardy's nose performing a shooting star press, and that the company had enforced a concussion protocol, meaning they needed to finish the match immediately. And that obviously did not happen. Instead of finishing the match immediately, Sammy Guevara ended up hitting his finishing move, the GTH, and obviously at that point it was not clear whether or not Jeff had a concussion, but broken nose, that is immediately a red flag. Like head trauma, we've seen it even with Matt Hardy in AEW, that in a match with Sammy Guevara actually, that the match continued, and it was honestly brutal to watch because you were watching someone who you knew had a concussion, who you knew was injured, who could not really defend themselves and was in no way, shape, or form able to carry on in that match. There's also, the speculation that there was there was an incident between him and Will Hobbs where Sammy Guevara just did not sell after that match, and that caused some weird stuff to happen between those two. I doubt it's that. I think this is definitely more of the Jeff Hardy situation. Building off of this, one thing we did see was that Hook and Chris Jericho are seemingly going to be a tag team moving forward. There's this big tag team tournament coming up. Hook and Jericho aligned themselves on the March 6th episode of AEW Dynamite. a spot that you would think would have been for Sammy Guevara if not for the suspension. At least that's the prevailing sentiment. And, it sucks for Sammy because he's been suspended like multiple times now. Obviously, like I think there are some like situations here where it's out of your control. Like there was the Andrade situation where Andrade was obviously the aggressor. Then there was the Eddie Kingston situation where I think that was a Sammy obviously crossed the line and there was a lot of miscommunication there, and neither man needed to let it go that far. And then this situation, I mean, like this I think is probably the most serious of them, just because this was one that directly impacted the safety of someone in the ring. And like, no matter what, the main thing in professional wrestling, if you're a wrestler, the number one thing you have to do is make sure that you protect your fellow wrestlers. And, Sammy Guevara in this instance did not do that to the best of his ability. And sometimes you got to pay that tax. It's unfortunate. We love Sammy, but I think at a certain point, like we have to see him, like take that next step, because a lot of what we've been hearing about Sammy Guevara has been this backstage stuff. And I'm not saying it's always his fault, and it's not always his fault, but he's always at the center of it, So at a certain point, we need to move past this, because like he's 31 years old. Sammy Guevara should be in a place where he is a main event singles talent. He just never has gotten there yet. And he's capable of it. I still think he's more than capable of it. But I think part of it is, the stop and start, the stop and start, the stop and start, like that have come out of these backstage situations. So we'll keep an eye on the Sammy Guevara thing. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the Kevin Kelly situation. Did he deserve to get fired? Let me know. I want to hear from you. Also, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.